Andrew Upton, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us about the world of this play and the moment in Russian history that it inhabits.
It's a big moment in Russian history. It's the just after the October Revolution in 1917. It's actually set about a year after it, in 1918. And the October Revolution, even though history has seen that the Bolsheviks won, it wasn't sure, it wasn't certain who was going to win in 1918, a year after it happened. The country had split. There was a lot of nationalist groups, little proto-fascist groups, and indeed the White Guard, who were the kind of czarist. They considered themselves the legitimate Russian army. So the country was very fragmented, and one of the big fragments that broke off was the Ukraine, Kiev being the capital city, and Bulgakov was a trained doctor from Kiev, and indeed fought as a medical man with the White Guard in 1918. So it's set in that place of great flux and change, and so even though we have a historical perspective where we know who won and we know the outcome, and grim as it was, we know that Uncle Joe is just around the corner, there's a sense in these characters that they could, well, from their perspective, take Russia back to what they wanted to be, or indeed lose everything that they know. So they're right on the cusp of change, radical change.
And the writer himself, Mikhail Bulgakov, he himself underwent a very dramatic transition from fighting for the White Guards, or being with the White Guards, as you pointed out, through to him becoming a part of the communist cultural intelligentsia.
Well, he didn't last long as a cultural intelligentsia, though, did he? He wasn't an obedient man, I don't think. It's true, Stalin loved this play, and I think he loved, when I did the adaptation, you could feel a bit of censorship in there. And I think self-censorship, and I would say very wise self-censorship on Bulgakov's part, where he had sort of tweaked the characters, perhaps pushed them into slightly sillier presentations, so they were a bit goofier. And I think they enjoyed. It's a very funny play, and he is a master at sort of mixing the comic and the tragic. Beautiful blend. But you're right. He did sort of travel through the Moscow Art Theatre and into what was the emerging new Russia. But he only had 2 plays produced in his life, and then it was, I think, it was all stopped. It was all censorship. By the 30s, he was the stage door manager, I think, of the...
And this is the thing, isn't it, that so many of them lived with during Stalinism. I mean, not just Bulgakov, of course, and so many other writers, the composers, Shostakovich and Prokofiev, where even if they were the canaries, the protected canaries in the cage, they were still in the cage and didn't know what was coming. I mean, how would an artist work with that?
Well, I think... I don't know, it'd be hell. But I think what Bulgakov's choice, which is not Shostakovich's choice, was to shut down, I think. And he wrote The Master and Margarita really for himself, you get the feeling. I mean, it wasn't published till the 60s, was it? He died in 49 or something. And it was published in America first. I think he literally wrote that for himself. And he has this great quote. He says, manuscripts don't burn. And I think he had this real sense that history would tell a different story, and that even though the victors often write history in the short to medium term, in the medium to long term, other things emerge. And I think Master and Margarita emerged. I think his plays will emerge. He was a great dramatist. He wrote 6 plays, as I said. Only 2 of them were produced in his lifetime. I think he shut down and relied on the future and providence. Look, he's dead. It's terrible, but his work is there to be had, and it is terrific work, and has had a great influence, I think, since the 60s particularly.
Captain Alexander Straczynski, this is Larian Sandowski, ex-Jitomir. We bathe together.
He is our cousin.
He pleased to meet you. Honoured to do that like...
So, just a little after 6 months of Sydney seeing the adaptation, another adaptation of yours, of Chekhov's Uncle Vanya, now this. What is it about you and the Russians?
Well, what is it about me and the Russians? Look, Tomasz, who directed Uncle Vanya, said this fabulous thing to the actors. He said, the stage is a place of destiny. And obviously, destiny and chance are intimately linked. I have no idea what this thing about me and the Russians is. I've always loved Russian literature. I've never really... I didn't know Gorky's work that well at all. It was a period of history I didn't know until 5 or 6 years ago. I slowly started looking at it. But as I uncover it more and more, it really suits my temperament. Another thing Tomasz, the director of Uncle Vanya, kind of taught me about Chekhov particularly was the simplicity of the language and the toughness of the language. And therefore, this thing I like to do with adaptations, which I think the audiences enjoy because it makes it more present, is not get into dusty, fusty, pseudo-old language, but actually keep it in present tone. And actually that fully suits Chekhov. Genuinely, I've discovered that through working with Tomasz. But also, it is a thing that seems to suit that Russian writer's temperament. It's quite sparky, and it's quite volatile, and it's. I hope. Their writing is certainly quite dangerous and provocative, and I think I love those things. So I found myself here, kind of by fate, chance, destiny, whatever. They're all very different things, but however I found myself here. But it's really fed me a great deal.
I read, I think it was in the British press, where you likened Russian literature to dinner table conversation. But it's a conversation that can become rather rowdy as more vodka's consumed and opinions come forth. Is it to you like a conversation where it does change dynamics and change tone over the course of an evening?
Absolutely. That's my favourite thing about it, really, is there's no... Even though there's great authorial hand, it's not the authorial hand of an Ibsen, say. Great writer, I'm not saying one's better than the other or one style of writing is better than the other, but the freedom of the authorial hand in this, particularly in Bulgakov and Chekhov, not so much in Gorky, to be frank, but there is still a wildness to the dealing out of the cards. That freedom allows for quite round opinions and quite round conversations and quite sort of difficult, complex characters, and like I say, that sort of volatility of the language is it's great fun to get your teeth into. And
how do you think it, not only adapting it, but how do you think it all translates to 21st century Australian audiences, and what do you think they take away from this?
The White Guard specifically, I think, is very much about a society on the brink of change. And a lot of drama, I think, is a lot of the attraction of going to the theatre or of engaging with drama is about seeing things happen that trouble society or trouble a group of people, trouble a community, seeing them enacted in some way. And that enactment, as I think it would be Aristotle, that can lead to catharsis, or it can lead to a kind of sense of having seen it, having engaged with it, and so therefore maybe it'll go away, or maybe we'll know how to deal with it better if it comes. And because I think change is always worrying for people, and particularly vast, big social change, I think this play beautifully, because Bulgakov was right there at one of the big ones in the 20th century, right there on the eve of the Russian Revolution and on the wrong side. I think he has got an instinctive grasp of how to place the individual, like the little individual, up against the sort of monolith of history or the monolith of society, and that is a great thing to see enacted. It's thrilling, it's funny, but it's also I think it tells you a lot about how we feel.
Yes to jobs.
Yes to better health for our kids.
And finally, doing something about climate change.
Having studied and shown audiences the risk of speaking out, with your wife, Kate Blanchett, having been criticised for being part of this Say Yes campaign about the pricing of carbon. For you, from your perspective, what parallels have you drawn as you've been preparing this play and seeing this outcry?
Well, it came quite late, actually, in the preparation of the play, so none, to be frank. But I mean, this is a society, fortunately, where you can have an opinion and you can express that opinion. And sometimes it goes one way and sometimes it goes the other. But obviously, we're of the opinion that climate change is a real threat and a real worry, and that we need to do what we can for the future, for the children, for our children, for the children of the future. So we expressed that opinion, and thankfully in this society opinions can be expressed and had and get taken and given a show trial and shot. So that's, I suppose, the only thing I've drawn is there is no Uncle Joe, thank heavens, breathing down our neck.
We are to be victorious and send our enemies hands. So for our great kind Tsar, a vector of atonement, strike victory from the blood, hurrah, hurrah!
And will there be Coles to Newcastle? Are you going to take any of the great Russian cannon to Moscow?
Oh, I'd love to. I would love to know what they think, actually. I would love to know what what someone who had both languages knew the play, knew how it was done, in its original form, or its, shall we say, censored form, and then saw this slightly pared back version. I'd love to know.
Maybe one day.
Well, I hope so.
Andrew Upton, it's been fantastic speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.